Hi again, folks. So we're back with chapter 3. So I had to pause the first video, upload that, and then do back this start again. Because if I stay too long, it actually gets cut off. So I have to be uploading my videos to my channel, my YouTube channel, because I think they say I have to have at least 50 subscribers before I go live. So please help me to reach that amount. I know I'm getting there. So you have to creep before you walk, as they say in Jamaica, and as I've always said. So I know I'll eventually get there. So please remember as you go along to like, subscribe, and share. Alright, so chapter 3. Early next morning, so we just get right into it. Chapter 3. Early next morning began the transfer of Haynes' belongings. Ella remained at number 9 to dispatch, and he went to number 2 to receive. He was down pretty early, about 7 o'clock, but Mrs. Rose and her household were already quite busy. Yesterday, while he was in the room making arrangements with her, he had been aware of people in the kitchen, but had no opportunity of noting more than that, the majority were women. But now, as he sat in his room, facing the kitchen, idling, while Ella was packing things on the cart, and no doubt having stiff arguments with the man as to how much exactly constituted a load. As he sat there, he could make a more detailed observation of his surroundings and his future neighbor. So Haynes moved now, he moved into this tenement yard, and now you're going to see the characters come out and the different characters that play now. The surroundings were nothing the eye would dwell on without reason. The yard was reddish dirt and bits of stone, but much more dirt than stone, so that on rainy days it would be a mass of slippery mud, treacherous to shoe and slipper, and needing care even from naked feet. Opposite his room was a kitchen, long, low, and concrete floored, with 2 doors that opened onto the yard and 2 windows that looked into the alley. As is usual in the tropics, all windows and doors were wide open, and he could see straight into it. Joined to the kitchen was the bathroom, and in front of the bathroom, but to one side was a pipe with a sink. For the rest, there was nothing else to see but the encircling hedge and the upper portions of the neighboring buildings. A dull enough prospect, but if the surroundings were drab, the inhabitants were busy. First, so he's gonna introducing different characters now. So first there was Mrs. Rose, who gave him a fine good morning, but had no time for anything else. She concentrated on the contents of 2 or 3 pots on the fire, but at intervals turned to a table where, unfortunately, he could not see what she was doing. She called frequently to one Archer, a tall, heavily built, quiet-looking youth of about 20, dressed in a patched and dirty pair of blue trousers and an old jacket without shirt or merino. He seemed rather dirty to be making cakes. He put large sheets of tin covered with cakes into the stove, and took them out for Mrs. Rose to see if they were baked enough. Meanwhile, regulating the heat by attending to the wick, usually at the dictation of Mrs. Rose, who, from her frequent admonitions and exhortations to those around her, was clearly the officer commanding. In the kitchen was another black man with curly hair, wearing socks and slippers. black trousers and white jacket. He was kneading flour, and never once did he turn his head. He had a good, deep voice. At first, the yard was empty, but after a time, a long, bony black girl came out of the kitchen and went to the sink, where she washed dishes. And not long after, a little boy, nearly white, came from inside the house. He played about in the yard with two marbles, stopping to take an interest in the contents of the first cartload which Ella sent down, only the first, because Mrs. Rose, happening to see him, told him not to be fast and to go inside and take his book. The boy, who at once obeyed orders, was about 8 years old. Unhealthy looking but cute. It was his color, however, which rather startled Haynes. He wondered at the presence of so fair a skin among all those dark people. Brownish though Mrs. Rose might be, it was inconceivable that she should be a party to any form of produce offspring with hair so straight and complexion so fair. He had not taken his book for 10 minutes when Mrs. Rose called to him by name, Sonny, and sent him to the front to see if Philomene and Maisie were coming. He came back and said, no. Mrs. Rose said she could not understand what was keeping them back, and added that it was the last day she would let Maisie go. When Haynes went up for lunch, Ella came down. Haynes ate quickly and went back to release her. As soon as she had left, Mrs. Rose came to the door of the room, followed by the black man. Mr. Haynes, this is Mr. Ben, your landlord. The man came in and she went back into the kitchen. I am Ben, he said, and shook hands. He was rather a big man with a slight paunch. His very black face was undistinguished looking, neither handsome, neither ugly. The very dark skin and curly hair showed traces of Indian blood. The only thing one might have noticed was a rather cruel mouth. Let me read that back. The only thing one might have noticed was a rather cruel mouth below the sparse moustache. The only thing one might have noticed was a rather cruel mouth below the sparse moustache. He might have been anything between 35 and 50, perhaps somewhere in the 40s. Ben was very much at his ease at once, and as he told Haynes not long afterwards, he knew from Mrs. Rose's description that Haynes was not one of those chaps who was stuck up. You do a lot of reading, I see, he said, looking at the books. Do you like books? Said Haynes. No time for that, man. Since I leave school, I ain't even opened a book. While he spoke, he was eating ground nuts, which he took from his pocket and shelled expertly. He chewed with short, quick bites. Have a few, he said suddenly. Thank you, said Haynes, and took two. Nuts is good things for men to eat, he observed. You had lunch already? Otherwise, I couldn't eat these, Haynes said. They would ruin my appetite. You're different to me. I'm not going to eat till nearly 2, but I will eat 4-cent nuts and roast corn. I'll suck orange, eat fig, mango, anything the whole morning, and that wouldn't prevent me eating my regular. He laughed, shelled 2 nuts at once, blew the thin skin away, threw the kernels into his mouth, and walked over to the window to look at something or someone in the street. Ella is coming, he said. You have a nice fat cook, man. The first day she come here to ask about the room, I like her, though I didn't know who she was. Mrs. Rose tell me you say she does everything for you, and you wouldn't let her go. He laughed again. Anyway, guard your property. I am a man girls like, you know. If she fall in my garden, I wouldn't have to lock the gate to keep her in. He laughed so heartily that Haynes was compelled to summon a sickly smile and ignore the shocking insinuation. So Haynes now just surprised by what this man said about him a man's girl and what have you. Haynes is so shocked because Haynes is not from this type of, space where people talk and behave like that. So get a shock of in life. Anyway, let's go back to the reading. Well, I'll see you later, Haynes said. Well, I'll see you later, Haynes, said Ben, shaking hands again. If you want any help in moving, anything, just call me. Wow, that was a mouthful there. Alright, so let's go on to chapter 4 now. We're at chapter 4. On the Saturday evening, Haynes, his back to the yard, sat by the window smoking. So Haynes moved into this new tenement yard now and he's settled in. Alright. On the Saturday evening, Haynes, his back to the yard, sat by the window smoking. The first exhilaration of newness had already worn off, and he contemplated his immediate future with a lack of enthusiasm, almost amounting to gloom. The room was small and irksome, after the luxury of 5 rooms in the other house. Particularly, one of the bookshelves was 4 inches too short to fit in with the other against the only available side. It stuck out at an offensive angle. From the open doors of the kitchen came an unwavering smell of baking and cooking. One door was directly opposite the door of his room, and so many people were up and down and taking a glance at him that he often had to keep his own door closed. A grave hardship in a tropical climate, and there were more people to come yet. In the next room to his was Miss Atwell, who was in defensive confinement. She was kept by a Mr. Cross, who had not turned up for weeks, and Miss Atwell consequently owed. Lord have mercy. She owed rent. She owed for other things and was in fear of seizure. Oh my. So she preferred to stay inside. Oh my God, this is so terrible, guys. So because of that, so this other character here, Miss Atwell, so because she owed rent and stuff, she keep her door and her windows locked. Oh my God. She owed rent, she owed for other things, and was in fear of seizure. So she preferred to stay inside, keeping door and window tightly closed, running a serious risk of suffocation in the terrible heat. Oh my goodness. I guess she's just embarrassed. He had been taken by Miss Maisie's face that first day. He had been taken by Maisie's face the first day. But whenever he looked at her, she was looking at him and smiling. So this is the young girl he met the first day when he came to check about the room. So we have an idea what's going to happen further down. Let me read back here. He had been taken by Maisie's face the first day. But whenever he looked at her, she was looking at him and smiling, which discouraged him. Although she had a cold and spat often, Phyllis, the Indian servant who lived in the house, was fat and brown and pleasant looking. Her masses of straight black hair, banded down by a white cloth, gave her a picture effect. She exuded good nature and smiled amicably, so that Haynes felt as much at ease with her as with Mrs. Rose. But on the whole, he wished he had not decided. But on the whole, he had wished he had not decided so. Ella interrupted his reflections. "Good night, sir." "Good night, Ella." But she did not go. Haynes swung his chair around. "What is wrong, Ella?" "Nothing, sir. Good night, sir." Well, it wasn't Ella's fault. She had acted for the best. In the kitchen, the lights were bright. Everything had been washed and cleaned and put away. For tomorrow, there would be no cakes to make. Supper would soon be ready. Sometimes the family ate in the dining room, but more often they snatched their meals in the kitchen. Tonight, however, a large white cloth had been spread on the kitchen table. Wilma was washing dishes at the sink. Phyllis was out, probably buying the groceries for Sunday cooking. Ben was nowhere to be seen. John, the cake seller, and Archer were sitting on a little bench which faced the room. Archer replying in monosyllables to John's casual remarks. Archer was a taciturn as he looked and inspired a vague respect. John was quite unremarkably expert for a prevailing simplicity of disposition and a fondness for cast-off garments. Suddenly, Maisie rushed around the house calling, "Sonny, Sonny, Sonny! Look, your mother come!" Mrs. Rose came to the kitchen door. Sonny, who was in the kitchen waiting for his supper, dashed out, held hands with Maisie, and the two of them ran round the house to the front. "Our lodger has come, Mr. Haynes," said Mrs. Rose. Everybody seemed very glad. "Yes," said Mrs. Rose, "we all like her. She's a nurse, you know, so that if you get sick, you have somebody on the spot to attend to you." "I hope I don't get ill," said Haynes, for want of something to say, rather than with any intention of mischief. "Oh, Mr. Haynes, I didn't mean that. Nothing like that must happen to you while you are here," she said. The dining room door opened, and a short, thin, fair woman in a nurse's uniform came down the steps, her son holding on to one hand. Behind him came Maisie with 2 or 3 parcels in her arms. The nurse went to the kitchen door, held Mrs. Rose's face in her arms, and kissed her twice. "So you're back, nurse. Yes, my Rose. And how you all pass the time? Everybody well? Everybody, come in. Maisie had entered the kitchen by the other door and was opening the parcels at a table while John and Wilma and even the solemn-faced Archer crowded around her. Come to the light, Sonny. Let me see you well. It was the nurse's voice. How is mother's child? Come and kiss me again, child. How did he behave, Miss Marose? He behaved well, nurse, said Mrs. Rose. Good. There's a kiss for that. Mwah. Come and see what I have brought for you. But Maisie, what do you mean opening everything the nurse bring like that? Maisie danced gaily outside. The nurse bring rum and wine and cherry brandy and cake and garters for me and stockings for Mrs. Rose and cloths to make a suit for Sonny and a tie for Mr. Ben. And when she opened her purse to pay the taximan, was only notes, big times. This, she said, partly to John and Archer, who had followed her outside, and partly to nobody in particular. I ain't going home until I get 2 drinks of that rum, said John. I ain't going till the bottle finished, said Archer. Wait till Mr. Ben come. The boss mustn't drink. It's not good for him, said John. Tell him that, you, said Archer. If he's a doctor, he wouldn't listen to. Is you ain't going here? The 2 of them sat on the little bench and the others began to eat outside. Phyllis came in on her arm a heavy basket. Nurse, you come. Then, oh Lord. And she started to laugh. How are you, nurse? You're looking well, she laughed. Sorry. How are you, nurse? You're looking well, she laughed again. But how is Miss A? Said the nurse during a pause. There was a burst of rippling laughter, while Maisie, there was a burst of rippling laughter from Maisie. Behave yourself, girl, said Mrs. Rose. And there was some whispering. Nurse called out, Good evening, Mrs. A. The door did not open, but a voice from inside replied, How are you, nurse? I am glad you is back. I myself is not too well. There was some more talking, voices lowered. Haynes felt sure this was about him. The voices rose again. Archer was sent for ice and there was drinking. He and John went inside and had a drink each. There were jokes about the amount John poured out. You think it's beer, said Maisie. And again there was a general laughing. The 2 men came back and sat on the bench. Mrs. Rose called Wilma to put out some supper for them, while she and the nurse sat talking. Phyllis moved in and out, joining the conversation and calling out bits of news to the nurse whenever she happened to remember them. Hey, nurse, you know we have a new cook, Mr. Haynes' cook. Her name is Ella. This she said from the sink. Hey, nurse, you know my mother came down last week and brought some eggs. I remember you to her. She asked me for you too. This she said from the yard. But nurse, you mean you couldn't get away even once? We all was so longing to see you. This she said from the dining room. Mrs. Rose rebuked her, but without severity. Phyllis only laughed louder. Maisie and Sonny kept running backwards and forwards from the kitchen to the front, begging for prunes and cakes. Maisie had to be reprimanded once for interfering with the cherry brandy. Gradually, the household settled down. They all went in and closed the back door after a perfect chorus of good nights. Haynes was bored and yet, when they left, missed them. For want of something better to do, he went to bed. So Haynes is seeing all of this through his window, right? All the different characters and what's going on in the yard. Right? He's seeing all this through his window and then everybody said good night and going. So he's a bit bored now. It's like you're watching a movie, you know? It's like you ever go out in the town and sit in a vehicle and you just watch the people going by. You know, you wonder where they're going, what they're going to do. It's like you're watching a movie. Haynes was bored and yet, when they left, missed them. For want of something better to do, he went to bed, but slept fitfully, and at 5 o'clock was awake. Tired from lack of sleep, he lay in a drowsy condition, annoyed with himself, and a determination to move from number 2, steadily taking shape in his mind. He would have to stay a month at least. Leaving so quickly would undoubtedly upset Miss Rose, who was very nice. He would leave it to Ella. Ella knew how he felt. She would find new lodgings and he would leave this blasted place with its eternal smell of cakes. So the place started to get to him now. He heard voices in the yard. In the stillness of the early morning, they were very clear. One voice was deep, Ben's, but talking in a low tone. Through the thin wood of which the house was built, sound from outside came through distinctly. Haynes' eyes, looking idly at his toes, were caught by a white crack of light between two of the boards. It had been plastered over with paper, but the paper had burst or been punctured long ago. He threw the pillow to the bottom of the bed, put his elbows onto it and peeped through. Ben stood by the kitchen door, and Wilma, the servant girl, stood washing at the sink. "Come here," said Ben. So Haynes peeping through the little hole in his room now and I watch what going outside. So I'm watching Ben calling the girl now. "Come here," said Ben. "Wait till I wash my face. This cold morning you're so hot." "Me? I am always hot," said Ben. Wilma wiped her hands on her dress and came up to Ben. "Well, what you want?" "What I want." He held her and placed her against the kitchen door. Then he leaned himself against her. "This is what I want." He kissed her savagely, and this, he kissed her again, and this too, and this, while he fondled her. She suddenly pulled herself away. "You're hurting me," she said. He made to hold her again. "No," she objected and shook her head. "You said you was coming last night and you didn't come. This is the second time, so these two having a private affair." They went into the kitchen. Haynes fell back on his bed, his eyes hurting him from the strain, he was peeping. He was suddenly no longer sleepy. Instead, he was very much alive. In fact, he behaved quite idiotically. He balanced himself on the small of his back and kicked his feet up in the air. So this interests him now. To read of these things in books was one thing. To hear and see them was another. And Haynes, though passionately interested in women and always reading about them, had never since he was grown up kissed or been kissed by a woman who was not related to him. Wow. He had at 16, after much cognition, but without preliminary, put his arm around a girl's waist and had been soundly slapped. Since then, he had never repeated the experiment and often experienced difficulty in looking young women fully in the face. And here now he had been pitchforked into the heart of the eternal triangle. Because this is that I love triangle that is about to be exposed. He lay on his stomach and peered through the crack again. He had heard the nurse's high-pitched, rather refined voice. Go quickly and don't stay, Wilma. The madam and Maisie gone to early mass and nobody's here. Haynes continued to peep, saw nothing, lay down again for 5 minutes, and then hearing nothing, thought he might as well have another peep. His eyes almost fell through the crease. Oh my God, hear what now? Just inside the kitchen door, he could see the nurse, her arms raised, probably around Ben's neck, for his left arm was around her waist and his black fingers stood out against the base of her neck, into which they pressed. The two remained almost unmoving for about a minute. Then they broke apart. So this man is a rat, Ben. Him having an affair with the nurse, him having an affair with Wilma. Two ladies in the yard so far. What a man. Ben came outside, but the nurse did not come at once. Quickly, nurse, he said, bending his head toward the kitchen. Mass will be over soon. The nurse came out with a hairpin in her mouth and shaking her long hair, which had fallen loose. She and Ben went towards the house. Haynes could stay in bed no longer. He began to walk up and down the room. He began to dress, intending vaguely to go for a walk. But he didn't go for any walk. Instead, he opened the door and sat waiting to see the household set about its daily task. The stage, he felt, was set for a terrific human drama. Of course, it's set for drama. Because this man in the yard is with how many women in the yard? If they're with Wilma, he's with Nurse, and let us see who else him having an affair with. So this is a drama waiting to unfold, yes? Ella came, made tea, and when Haynes had eaten and lighted a cigarette, she closed the door. I asked a friend of mine to look for another place, sir. I see you don't like it here. Ella, don't worry, said Haynes. I like it here. So the drama, what him see now make him change his mind. Him no want bother move again. I like it here. I like here well enough. I was a little tired yesterday and that was all. You want to stay, sir? Yes. We'll see how things turn out. Can't come 1 month and leave the next. It wouldn't be any trouble for me to get another place, sir. Don't you worry, Ella, said Haynes. We'll have to make the best of this for the time being. Don't you worry. He smiled. He smiled smugly. I'll stay, and I think I shall get to like it very well. And we all know why he said that. Yeah. A lot of drama will be unfolding in this yard. Yeah. So, folks, so gentle folks, we're going to stop there for this evening. Right? So we stop at chapter 5. So when we come back again, we'll be going into it. And I can't wait. I can't wait, because this is getting interesting now. Yeah, drama. Alright, so we're going to leave it there, folks. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for joining me. I much appreciate it. Thank you for my subscribers. Thank you to my viewers. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Alright, so you all have a wonderful Sunday evening. Finish doing what you're doing. Probably going to have your dinner, going for a walk, or going to do some house chores or whatever it is. Or just relax. Enjoy the rest of the Sunday evening, and thank you so much. Please remember to like, subscribe and share. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Share to your friends. Tell your friends about it, your family. Alright, thank you so much, and I appreciate you. So bye, and I'll see you folks again. See you soon, and have a blessed week. Bye.